Hello, everyone. Welcome. Come on in. We're getting started here. So if you're watching us, go ahead and open up the chat, and you can say hi. Let us know you're here, where you're watching from, what the weather's like, what you're interested in learning about today, anything like that. You can throw that in the chat. So down on the bottom toolbar there of your Zoom screen, there's a chat icon, and you can open that up and say hello like Bet just did. Hey, Bet, glad you're here. I am going to go ahead and get us up and running the live stream into our Facebook group. So get that going now. And we will get started in just a minute. So we've got Graham, Kyle, hey, welcome everybody. Glad you could make it. We've got a lot to talk about today, so excited to get started. We got everything in here already. That's great. Share to our group, and we'll be sharing this in the GoWP Digital Agency Owners group, and we should be streaming shortly. We got Jen from Rhode Island. A quick note, if you are chatting, you have a couple options here. So you've got a chat to everyone, to host and panelists, or you can send direct messages, I believe, as well. So if you want to send a chat that everyone can see, make sure you have that option selected. Otherwise, it'll probably just be, if you put host and panelists, it'll just be me and the folks up on the screen that are able to see your chat. So just that note there. And we are live on Facebook as well. So it looks like we're just about ready to get started. And give me 1 second. Okay. All right, so let's get started. We've got lots of folks in the chat saying hi. Kyle has let us know that the Mexican pizza is back at Taco Bell, so he had to make a run for the border before today's discussion. So glad you could make it in time, Kyle, with your Mexican pizza. Wonderful. So hey everyone, I'm Emily from GoWP, and welcome to today's panel discussion. It is Global Accessibility Awareness Day today, and that is why we have scheduled this talk today, and this amazing group of panelists as well. So I'm really excited to get started on this talk that we have, and hear the expertise and experience and insights from these amazing panelists we have. We've already done a quick test of the chat. It looks like it's working for everybody. Again, if you can't find the chat, it is on the bottom screen, the bottom of your Zoom screen there. You should be able to find it there and open it up and take part in the chat that's going on. If you are watching this live stream over in Facebook, you're more than welcome to join us in the Zoom room, the Zoom webinar. You just have to register, and then you'll get the link in. I see Todd's watching over on Facebook, so that's great. If you're watching on Facebook, send us a comment. And Kyle, Todd's wondering if you could send him a Mexican pizza as well. So we'll see if we can make that happen. Really quick, I just want to say a couple words about GoWP, in case anyone watching isn't familiar with us. At GoWP, we like to say that we create happiness for digital agencies. And we do that by helping them to become more profitable by matching them with some of the incredible GoWP pros we have in our network. So whether you're looking to grow your team with a developer, a copywriter, a designer, a VA, virtual assistant, or you're interested in outsourcing services so you can focus on growth, we've got you covered on all of those things. So on top of being able to hire a developer, designer, copywriter, VA, we've also got our managed services like website maintenance, content edits, case studies, blogging, page build outs, all that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in what that looks like partnering with GoWP to grow your agency, reach out to me, Emily at GoWP, or you can hit us up on our chat on our website or in the Facebook group, whatever you want. We're here to answer those questions and help out as well. We've also built the digital agency owners community on Facebook, and if you're not there, we'd love to have you. It's an active community of more than 2,000 agency owners where we hold regular group calls, we do webinars, we do panel discussions like this. and all with the goal to help you grow your agency. So I will share the link to our Facebook group if you have not joined us. We'd love to have you there. So I'll get that link to you, into the chat here. So anyone who's not there can join us there as well. We're live streaming this event there at the moment now. So a few notes regarding the webinar. There's the chat. If you have questions during the panel discussion that you want me to get to the panelists, put them in the chat. I'll be watching, and I will note those down and get them to the panelists as we have time to do that. And other than that, that's about it. So I think we're ready to get started. I'll do a quick introduction and then we'll jump right into some of the questions that we have. So we are here today with Amber Hinds, Alex Stine, and Meg Miller. Amber is the CEO of Equalize Digital Incorporated, a certified B Corp specializing in WordPress accessibility. She's also the maker of the Accessibility Checker plugin and the lead organizer of the WordPress Accessibility Meetup and WordPress Accessibility Day conference. Alex Stine is a DevOps engineer with Kinsta. He is an accessibility consultant and a member of the accessibility team for Make WordPress. Alex started in web development doing tech support, and not long after starting in tech support, Alex lost what vision he had, and he's now completely blind. And this is what motivated him to enter the accessibility world and fed his desire to help make the web more accessible to anyone who wants to use it. Meg Miller has worked in tech the majority of her adult life, from startups to large tech companies. Between growing up with a severely disabled sister and having a disabled husband, web accessibility is a personal pursuit for Meg. She continues to work hard toward ensuring universal access becomes the industry standard. And Meg is currently lead developer for Bet Hannon business website. So welcome everybody, it's so good to have you. For those of you watching, as you can tell, we really have gathered some great minds on accessibility. So let's jump right into the questions. Some of you a lot of you are aware that we initially had this conversation scheduled to be taking place on Crowdcast, where we have been holding our webinars lately. We changed that, obviously. So now we're on Zoom, and you probably got the email letting you know that that was happening. And the reason is because when we did a practice run through the other week, we found out that Crowdcast is actually very inaccessible. And I'd like if we can kind of start the conversation off here, because I got some questions in response to that email as well. So Alex, do you think you could kind of walk us through what that experience was like for you and what led us to having to change platforms?
Yes. So the experience was great up until I clicked the link in the email. So that basically means not too much further after email. I was able to navigate to the fields to enter some information for registration. A lot of the fields weren't labeled. It was very hard to tell what to enter where. It was hard to figure out how to submit the information I entered. And after I finally made it into the call, I saw no call controls, no way to mute, no way to turn on video, no way to do anything.
Yeah, and so that's where then I brought Alex onto the screen in Crowdcast, and his first response was, this is a horrible platform in terms of accessibility. And I'm sure, as those of you listening and watching can imagine, it would be very poor practice to have an accessibility discussion on a platform that is so inaccessible. So this is something I was unaware of until having the feedback from Alex going through that experience. Bet is asking if we have contacted Crowdcast. I have not yet. I have not had the time to, but I do intend to. I did also see that they just released a new version. I'm not sure that accessibility was addressed at all in that new version. I have no clue, but I do intend on contacting them, because yeah, that's where we hold our webinars, and if it's inaccessible, right? If they have so many issues, and if they have really the lack of prioritize, like I can't even use the word prioritizing. It sounds like from Alex's feedback is that it just wasn't even an afterthought at this point. The work just has not been done to make that platform accessible for folks who are visually impaired. So yeah, I do plan on contacting them. We got to keep pressure on these companies. I agree, Kyle, saying that in the chat. So absolutely, we will contact them. And in the end, you know, it's something that we had to take action on. It created a bunch of extra work in order to make this happen because of that. But it's work that needed to be done to do this right. So I'm glad we had that practice session, because otherwise this would have been a fiasco, I think. So thank you, Alex, for sharing your experience on that. If anyone has any other questions on that, feel free to put them in the chat. So that is why we're here on Zoom. We're back on Zoom today, and that's why that happened.
I have a thought, if you don't mind me chiming in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I noticed someone posted in the chat, and I missed the name and it scrolled up, but basically saying it's wild because it's used by so many live events. And I think one of the things that I've heard with some other platforms, and I don't know specifically about Crowdcast, but there's some really popular ones that don't support captions, which is another big part of accessibility. And so I think if you are someone who organizes events or does live streams, like those are maybe things that you have to think about, because there are all kinds of people in all kinds of different industries that, whether you're targeting consumers or professionals, that may attend your events. And so really thinking about that. And I would say if you're choosing a platform, I would always ask, if they don't have it in their FAQs, I would contact their tech support and just ask, you know, do you have a accessibility conformance report or a VPAT, which is an official statement of accessibility? Is a great thing to ask. And then if they say no, then I would say, okay, what have you done for accessibility?
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna follow up with you on that, Amber, so I can have a very well-versed question asked to Crowdcast after this. So that's really good. Yeah, Beth's saying she had a similar experience with Calendly. So it's incredible. It's really eye-opening when you find out that these big platforms that seemingly everybody uses, that they are so inaccessible. So that's interesting. Terry is asking if Facebook Live is accessible. Alex, do you have any thoughts on any experience with that?
So I think Facebook Live itself actually works fairly well. I haven't used it in a long time, and I do know that Facebook introduces accessibility issues pretty religiously. Like right now, there's a horrible bug in Firefox and Google Chrome where screen readers do not read the date timestamp of when something was posted. So that is really not good.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that we had that feedback. I'm not sure what happened there. Mariah joined in the call. So interesting that, yeah, that is, so the Facebook Live experience is fairly decent then for you, Alex?
Yeah, I think so. But where I was going with that is even just trying to read basic posts right now. I mean, instead of reading something like posted 10 minutes ago, it reads out as a bunch of nonsense letters and numbers. So you don't even know if you've read it or not.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
And before anyone asks, I've reported it a total of 3 times now, and there's been no action on it in the last 3 weeks.
Wow. Okay, so we can see, obviously, accessibility, if you're not aware, it is a big issue, especially for those people who are experiencing these things daily. It's why we're having this discussion today, and to bring awareness. It's Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So things that, speaking personally, that I never even considered and realized over the last couple of weeks just in planning this discussion. There's a million more examples of that. So let's get into it. Alex, one question that you hear a lot, you have said, is surely accessibility doesn't affect my company, does it? So how do you answer that question? What are the types of companies that kind of default to that sort of mindset? And what do you say to them?
Well, this is a question I hear a lot, but it's one that I really dislike answering. And the reason is because it's easier to count the companies that don't ask me this question than the ones that do. Accessibility matters to everyone, especially companies that sell a service, because in my opinion, that is straight up discrimination to deny someone to buy a service online. Now, there's been arguments in the past where, okay, online's not accessible, but you can go to a physical location and buy it. Well, now we start talking about other accessibility factors, like how accessible is the transportation to get to that physical location? But it all comes full circle at the end of the day. You need to be accessible because not only is it the right thing to do, but, we do have some legal remedies at some level for that. And companies could be held liable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Amber or Meg, do you have anything to add to that response? I mean, I know you both experience this as well, dealing with companies and building sites and that sort of thing too.
I mean,
sorry, Amber,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, it's when I first started getting into accessibility, it's kind of one of those, you don't know what you don't know type things. And it's so important to make companies aware that everybody needs to be within that demographic. We all hate to hear it. Who's my demographic? Everybody. But you need to consider everybody. And you really don't know what you don't know. And my go-to example for this is, for example, somebody running, selling kitchen stuff or running a food blog, stuff like that, thinking that, somebody who's blind surely isn't within my demographic. And then, I actually brought this up to another colleague of mine, Nick Peterson, who is legally blind, and he's the primary chef in his household. So we have all these assumptions that we need to break, and they're built off of this stereotypical idea of what your user is, somebody sitting at a keyboard, no disabilities, fully sighted, everything like that. For example, I use captions because I'm not in any way, I'm a little bit hard of hearing, I guess, so I've been like that for a long time. But I'm not legally disabled in any sort of way in when it comes to my hearing, but I prefer captions. So somebody may look at me and say, oh, so it's just a luxury then, it's not a necessity. And that's just an assumption we need to break. It is a necessity. The assumption that people aren't using your product is bad business, frankly. And you want to make sure that you want to make people aware that I quote unquote, very strong quote unquote, ideal user doesn't exist, because that ideal user could break their arm and suddenly have a motor impairment. Anything could happen, and suddenly your original ideal user has a disability, whether it's temporary or permanent, and that illusion needs to be completely broken to make people more, the point of this day, aware that yes, they are in your demographic. So it's just the myth that people without disabilities aren't in your demographic, because it's just kind of a silly way to look at things. No offense intended, absolutely, but not considering that is not good practice for your user base.
I think too, something if you're talking to clients, is it's important to emphasize along the lines of some of the things you said, Meg, is that not all disabilities are visible. So they probably have customers that have disabilities, whether it's a traumatic brain injury or whether it's, a reading disability that they've had or challenge that they've had ever since they were a child that impacts their ability to read content if it's formatted in a certain way or using certain fonts. So there's you know, there's a lot of people that have disabilities or challenges that we don't even know if we look at them, right? Like you never know who someone is. And then there's also cases too where older people really benefit a lot. Like, I don't think my grandma would tell you she's disabled, but she definitely benefits from accessibility features on websites, right? And so it's just almost everyone benefits.
Absolutely. I think those are some great responses and really compelling arguments. One question that came in during that conversation there was about the Zoom chat, and Amber, you answered it in the chat as well. Graham asking if Zoom chat has a way of being accessible to non-sighted users, and it's actually something we dealt with as we were preparing to go live today. Was figuring out how to turn off the Zoom chat notifications because they can be very disruptive. So, for example, for Alex today, who's a panelist, he doesn't necessarily want to be hearing the all of the chat being read in his ears also while we are talking as well. So Alex, is there anything else you'd like to say about the accessibility features on Zoom?
Unfortunately, that is the one area that Zoom falls massively short in. The chat is not great, and that's me being fairly nice. Even just a basic navigating the chat works fine, and then you come up to a link you want to select, you press tab and you press enter to open the link. Simple. Well, when you go back to the chat and you try to navigate up and down, you're going to find that that's quite an issue. Most of the time you have to close and reopen the chat and hope you didn't lose your place, and it's just crazy to me. It's like it's just gone without any testing at all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for me, it's so enlightening to hear your feedback on these things, because I think it's things that a lot of folks just haven't considered, and they would be incredibly frustrating to experience. So yeah, that's really interesting. I hope we answered your question there, Graham. Another question for the panel. What are this one, we'll start with Amber. So what are some common accessibility problems that exist in content? Amber, we've been talking about a lot of them already, but what would you say in your experience are things that you just see all the time over and over again?
Specifically in content or just in general? So
we said in content, but if you want to take a
Okay.
general too, we can go there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, content is always a good place to start because anyone can fix these problems without being a developer, generally, depending upon what tools they're using to build their website. But I would say like some of the common ones that we see when we do audits are images missing alternative text, which is a hidden attribute on the image that describes what the image is of, or they have alternative text, but it's incorrect. Sometimes we see people are just like copying the title, which is in default in WordPress, the file name, and they stick it in the alt text, and or we see things where we just audited a website with the page builder and it was putting the alt text and the title and it was the exact same, so it would read out both when you tried it with the screen reader. Like, you don't really need both. Another one would be ambiguous anchor links, so links that say just like learn more or click here or download or even add to cart on a product page where there's multiple products and it doesn't specify which one you would be adding to cart. And headings being out of order. I see this all the time, and pretty much if you buy a commercial WordPress theme, it's going to come with a really bad heading order, because I think a lot of designers or theme developers are still in the land of thinking that you just choose your heading based upon the color it is or the size of the font. And they don't really realize that you're supposed to use them in proper semantic order, as if you're building an outline for your content. Those are some of the top content ones that we see and come across that are kind of easy for anyone to fix.
Absolutely. Yeah. Meg, are there some other ones that you could speak to?
Well, you know, I since the first day, I've been a massive Gutenberg supporter, and I feel like it has been made accessibility even easier when it comes to modifying content, specifically in WordPress. So There's still a lot of people holding off and using classic editor. So I still see lists that were used by, you know, hyphen, whatever. I see a lot of, you know, yeah, the headings are always all over the place. So are the links. I also see, in addition to that, what I want to tack onto the headings is the headings need to actually, they're meant for organization, and sometimes I'll see people using that style of heading for a huge block of text. So you've got an H2 being used as a block quote for something that's 2 to 3 sentences long, which isn't necessarily great. I'm still seeing sliders pop up every once in a while, which is, you know, depending if you're using a plugin, this could easily be either a technical issue or a content issue. Plugins, if you're using I'm very anti-slider. I'm very vocal about being anti-slider. So I highly encourage disabling slider plugins. You know, that can be technically a content issue. Now that's more of a technical issue. It kind of blurs together, you know, in terms of, you know, making sure that if you're using a button tag, it's actually something that creates an action and not a link that goes to somewhere. Sometimes that gets confusing. That's definitely a little bit of a back end issue. Yeah, I think we covered all the, I'm just going to keep rambling.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
there's a
we covered
lot,
everything.
I'm sure.
You know, it's interesting on that. You mentioned things that should be, that are like not actually formatted as lists, but they're like fake to look like a list.
Yeah.
And I was going to say one thing that we come across a lot, like I saw this on a website that we were auditing the other day, where it had a heading that was like our 8 things. And then they were laid out in 2 rows with 4 columns, and they just been added in the page builder. Like it's an image and a text, and an image and a text, right? So they're in divs. But I'm like, really, the format of this should be a list, like so when people encounter it on a screen reader, they would hear like item 1 of 8,
Yeah.
item 2 of 8, right? So that they know it's all connected together. And then you could still style your list to look like that. But I think that's something people don't think about as much, like using the proper semantic HTML.
I recently saw a site that was actually using a list, not a real list, not a semantically correct list. It was, you know, straight up copying and pasting bullet characters in a caption. So that was an interesting one. I also want to point out tables. Tables are also something that I come across often. That is just,
I bet Alex has.
We don't talk about tables.
One question that came in was, what are some good tools for helping content creators remember to make their content accessible? Do you guys have some suggestions there? Some suggestions there?
Well, our plugin Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker was created to put reports on the edit screen, sort of like an SEO plugin is. We're going to look at it later. But that was one. There's browser tools that are helpful that anyone can install, whether it's Wave or I've been using IBM's Equal Access browser extension recently, which is totally open source and free. Unlike Axe is great, but Axe also has like a pro version. So it's kind of like, here's your basic and here's your, you can upgrade to pay more. And IBM is just like, we're just putting this out here. I don't know if there's other ones within WordPress that you all are aware of, plugins specifically.
Nope. Okay.
Nope.
If anyone has any to share in the chat as well, they can share those there too. I'll get the link to the IBM browser extension too. That sounds helpful. Let's get to the next question. So Alex, let's start with you on this one. And I know this is a difficult question and hard to choose, but if you had to, are there maybe 2 or 3 most important things that folks can do when they're building a site that will make the biggest difference for accessibility? If you could just say, at the very least, do these, 2 or 3 things.
Number 1, pay attention to order of content. One of the most famous examples I use for this is Amazon. So a lot of people don't, I don't know how this shows visually, but I would have to guess that a lot of people don't realize this because it's terrible user experience. But you pull up a product on Amazon and one would naturally think that the add to cart button is under the main heading. In my experience, I've always found the add to cart button is actually above the main heading, right under the navigation options and above another related products carousel. It is absolutely a nightmare to find with a screen reader. So when you're thinking about importance and context, make sure that things follow a reasonable flow. So that is a good number one.
Yeah,
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Alex. No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Number two would be to always label images, or if the image is decorative, doesn't add any value to the content, just leave alternative text empty. But to just hear a graphic and have no idea what it is, that is really frustrating. 3, there's a lot of research available to us today, and it is amazing to me how all the graphs that people use cannot be represented in text formats. So there'll be all this great information and all these great ways to back it up, and most of the time I can't read a good portion of it. Something that is relatable to all of us, COVID-19 trends. I can't tell you how many Department of Health websites use inaccessible graphs that give me absolutely no idea what the numbers look like.
That's really interesting. I hadn't even considered that. Yeah, Amber, go ahead.
So we talk about this a lot and I'm always curious, is your preference, Alex, would you just want a table as an alternative to the graph, or would you like a written like paragraph style description of the graph? What do you feel like is more usable and meaningful to you?
Table is definitely more usable because it's a lot easier to navigate the information. If it's done right, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And Amber and Meg, do you have something different on your top 3 kind of hit list of accessibility things to cover?
So one thing Alex didn't mention that I think is super helpful is having skip links on your website, which if you're not familiar with that, basically what it is, it's a hidden link that is the first element on the page. And if you hit your tab key, it would become visible and it would receive focus, and it would allow someone who is a keyboard only user, which could be someone on a screen reader, or it could be a sighted person with mobility challenges, they can't use a mouse, or who's even just using eye tracking potentially, to hit that link and jump down to where the main content starts and not be forced to have to tab through all of the navigation items, which if you can imagine on some business websites, they have a lot of menu items. And so being able to skip that and not being forced to go through it on every page can make a huge difference for someone in getting to the content faster.
Awesome. And Bet, thank you. Just shared a link with some more information on that as well. So that, yeah, that's great. Meg, anything you would add?
If you're starting a project from the ground up, or even just redesigning something, almost every single site I audit has a color issue. So just run those colors through a checker. It takes a couple minutes and figure it out from there and make sure that people can actually read your colors. It's not uncommon for me to still see a very light peach or lime or yellow on white, and it's just not readable. Even I'm 30 years old and I don't wear glasses and I can barely read that stuff. Maybe I should wear glasses. Other is people whenever new design trends come out in some form or another, menus are always on there, whether this is a new style of menu, this is a new way to do menus. And so then come the plugins to do these. And when you're adding these layers onto your website, and this is also exclusively speaking in WordPress, though, you know, people who are building in HTML should be aware of how their menus are working. It is not uncommon for these menu plugins to add this extra layer that is not aware of what's going on with the theme and then creates additional accessibility issues, whether they don't have dropdowns that are keyboard accessible. Maybe you can tab through the dropdowns, but you can't see them because the dropdown isn't apparent on focus. Maybe it's a flyout menu, but they don't, the only way to get out of it is to do a mouse click off the screen. So I just be very aware of what you're doing with your main menu, because it's going to be the primary navigation of your website. And if people can't navigate your website, then what's the point of having a website? Unless you put the only important information on the homepage. So just be really aware of adding too much pizzazz to that main menu, because it's so important to any user's experience.
Thank you, Meg. And there was a question that came in a bit earlier, and since you brought up menus, I'll ask it now. The question was, are mega menus okay? So I'm assuming that means menus that have a lot of sub menus, you know, all of that. So what's your recommendation there?
So they can be okay. It really depends on how they are coded. There's a really great example, and maybe you'll be able to grab the link. If not, I can look for it in a minute, that Adobe has put out for making more accessible mega menus. And there's like a GitHub repo, and they have like an example of how it functions. So the things that we try and build into our menus, and Alex has been very kind to test some of ours and give us some feedback to help us improve ours, is they always have a button next to the item that can be triggered to expand or collapse the sub navigation. And then by default, if you tab through the top level items, you aren't forced to, you go to top level 1 and then be forced to go into the sub menu. And if you can imagine a mega menu that might have, I don't know, 20 items, if you're forced to go through every single one of those, so you can go across the top if you want, you could go down into one item, and then like using the arrow keys to be able to go up and down in addition to tab can be helpful. Also, if you're in a sub nav, being able to hit escape and it will close the nav and take your focus back up to where you were when you opened it. So like those kinds of things. So they can be accessible. There's like one mega menu plugin in WordPress that kind of gets close, but I'd say most of the existing ones, and even that one isn't, like, it needs help to be perfect. So like, I think if you're just relying on a plugin and not custom coding it for yourself or your clients, then it could be more challenging to actually have it. And it would almost be better to not have a mega menu probably, and just take people to the page and have them as listed as a sub pages or something like that.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
a minimalist.
Yeah, Meg.
Yeah, I think that most people don't require a mega menu, and short of like an online retailer, maybe, but you know, I think that when people think all of their content is important and they need to get it into the mega menu, then none of it is important, because it's all about, you know, people's attention span is shorter than ever, and nobody has time to fish through a giant mega menu. So I think if you're implementing a mega menu on a website that probably doesn't need it, it speaks to a broader accessibility issue in terms of not being able to streamline your content for your users, and a lack of being particularly user friendly, giving them that direct route to where they need to go.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a reason why you need a video in your navigation menus, yet I see people doing that. They're like putting a video in, which means also that video is loading on every page, and I'm sure that's not great for speed.
Wow. Yeah, that's good answers there. So I think we definitely covered that question. We had a few other questions come in. So one was a favorite color checker. I think we shared, Bet shared a link to a contrast checker in the chat there, and we shared that over on Facebook. Do you all have any other favorite contrast checkers, color checkers?
I have a link to a blog post with over 30 different
Oh,
checkers in
great.
there.
Yeah, let's have it.
I can probably, let me fish that out real quick.
So
Yeah.
I like to use, I might have accidentally thrown a very long link in the chat that actually has a bunch of colors pre-saved in it, but there's a contrast grid that 8 Shapes created, and it allows you to define rows and columns. And so you can put in your client's brand colors, and then it will tell you how they work with one another. And it will give you, you have the option of AA or AAA or AA, but large font. And so this is really helpful with our clients if they come to us with an existing brand palette. Like I can just put it in, and then I can turn off everything that's not AA or AAA. Like I even turn off large font AA, and then I'll see, well, 2 squares work, you know, and then we're like, okay, how can we adjust this, right? But them seeing very visually, like if this is the foreground and this is the background, has been very helpful.
Very cool tool. And we'll share that link over on Facebook as well. Great. Let's see. Another question that we've got here is, one thing I want to touch on real fast, just to make sure people who are watching this recording don't miss out on. Craig asked a great question about adding to cart. And so he said he hadn't realized that add to cart on a page with multiple products wasn't accessible. What, Amber, can you just reiterate again what your suggestion would be for when there's a lot of product names that can be quite long, what to put in those buttons or how to do that correctly?
Yes, so there are ways that you can label buttons for a non-sighted user that don't require that label to be visible to a sighted user. So the 2 options are you add screen reader text, which would be included with the label in a span class. And so it would hide it visually, but it would still be available. And so then it would just usually be after whatever this is. And this is how a lot of read more links in core WordPress function, where they add it and they append the post title, the blog post title to that. The other alternative is to use it as an ARIA label instead. And so that's an attribute that you would put on the button or the link, depending on what it is. So the actual text would just be learn more, but it would have an ARIA label that is read out instead by a screen reader. I think that the ARIA label option can be better if you're expecting a lot of translation to happen on the website, because I think it will do a better job of reordering words if it needs to when an automated translator encounters it than it might when you have the screen reader text, because it's separated in a span class from the other element.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm glad Craig asked that, because I was wondering that as well when you mentioned it earlier. Alex, a question for you that came in on Facebook. Do you have recommendations on the best and also the worst browsers? Are there browsers that are better than others when it comes to accessibility?
Well, the gold standard used to be Firefox, and even for editing in Google Docs, like Google Drive, the accessibility support article would say, use Firefox. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Shouldn't it say use Google Chrome? I mean, after all, you all did create it. But yeah, now at least I, myself anyway, have started to see a shift where there's a lot of sites that Firefox just doesn't work well with anymore. So I have little option but to use Google Chrome. Any website like Stack Overflow is one of the worst. It crashes Firefox all the time. Works fine in Chrome, so my only conclusion is there was some update here recently where accessibility just went forgotten or something, or whatever the conclusion may be. I can say in the most latest version I went to probably a couple days ago, it hadn't gotten any better.
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Thank you, Alex, for that response. Another question that just came in: best and worst form plugins, and this is from Kyle. He wants to know the worst ones too. It helps to know which ones to absolutely avoid, so we can cover them all. Who wants to start this one?
I actually have had some issues with a lot of people who are using WP forms, and the CAPTCHA and so many math problems. And it has no alt course, because I guess the robots would be able to pick up on that, but it's completely inaccessible. With that combination is the best I've found is Gravity Forms, which is a premium plugin, but I found very few issues with them, and they just keep adding more and more accessibility features. Every once in a while I hit an issue with Contact Form 7, and I know I've hit one with Ninja Forms, but I can't remember what it is. But I seem to see that math problem CAPTCHA with WP Forms so often that it's created a trend for me in my mind.
Yeah, I would second Gravity Forms. I think one of the reasons that I like them beyond that the front end output is pretty good is that they provide accessibility hints in the back as you are building out your form, which is really useful if you're like, let's say you've handed your website over to a client and they're going to make their own forms. It will tell them, oh, hey, if you leave this label blank, this is a WCAG violation. Like, it'll put a red arrow and it will link over to the thing, right? Which that's really what we need in WordPress, is more suggestions in the back end for non-accessibility experts. And so I'm super impressed that they like took it upon themselves to do this. And so like, I just can't recommend any other form plugin beyond that, because I feel like they're making accessibility a huge priority, not just in the output, but also in guiding people to use their tool in the right way. I would probably second or say something about the Contact Form 7, only because it requires, like, it kind of writes out the HTML for you. And so in some sense, it can be very accessible because you could edit it however you want. But the idea that a non-dev user is going to do that correctly, it's just not realistic. And so I can't suggest a tool like that. Like, I think you need to have a form plugin that has a more visual interface for non-technical users.
Yeah, there's a couple people asking about Fluent Forms and WS Forms. Is another question that came in. Any thoughts on those?
Well, I haven't used either of those, so I'm not certain. The one that I've heard of that I know some accessibility people use is Formidable. I haven't used that one, but I'm wondering if Alex has thoughts about forms and accessibility on WordPress.
So something that a lot of people fail to think about is the backend accessibility. So it's great and all that there's form plugins out there that allow you to drag and drop things, but that's automatically inaccessible to people who are blind or people with other difficulties that are trying to build forms. So that's where Contact Form 7 really excels for me. Is it takes a little bit of work, but you can make the front end accessible and the back end is accessible right out of the box. Now, I can't speak for Gravity Forms because I'm too cheap and refuse to buy it and try it. But, it's a good chance that if they put that much thought into accessibility, then Gravity Forms backend is probably fairly decent as well. But when you start talking about Ninja Forms and forms with a lot of features with very little accessibility thought, then backends become afterthoughts.
It seems that the consensus is that it's pretty obvious when these companies who are building these products are prioritizing accessibility, right? So it's clear and it's obvious to the user that, oh, they care about this and they've actually brought someone with some expertise in to help develop this. So that's really great.
It's even deeper than just caring though, right? It's the fact that if I submit a bug report, I expect it to get at least, oh yeah, in the next 6 months, we'll work on this. But generally, the way it goes is, thank you for your bug report. We're not going to do anything with it. Have a nice day.
Yeah, so having a company that does not just care, but acts on it, absolutely.
Yes.
I want to make sure, so another part of today's discussion is learning a little bit more about the accessibility checker, and we're going to get a demo of that. But I did just want to do some quick hit questions that we still had some come in. A quick one is heading levels in footers. How do you set heading levels and footers when you don't know what the content heading level stops at? So that was a question that came in earlier for Amber. Is there a quick answer there, Amber?
Yeah, so the quick answer is it's irrelevant what your content heading level stops at, because your footer isn't nested under your last heading in your content. So if you don't have so some themes put a hidden H2 that just says footer, and then they would make all of the headings in their footers H3s, and that's kind of nested under the footer. And if someone was on a screen reader and they wanted to, they could hear the headings H2 and jump to that footer section. If you're not doing that, then probably your heading should be an H2 so that they're at the same level as your top level content headings. But I think it's probably better to group them under a footer heading.
Awesome, thank you. And I think she actually, as I was asking, reposted the question more with more detail, and I think we answered it. So Stacy, let us know if not, but thank you, Amber. Okay, if you still have questions for Alex and Meg and Amber, we can get to those. We're going to do one last question, then we're going to jump into the presentation, the demo for the accessibility checker, so you all can see what that looks like and how you can use that to help make your sites more accessible. The last question, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone what the answer is here, and I think we're all at a consensus, but which page builder is the most accessible? Let's start with Alex on this one. What's the most accessible page builder, Alex?
So by far the most accessible for front-end output would be the Beaver builder. They have actually done a really great job with accessible output. As far as backend goes, none of them. And I'm gonna go ahead and pick on Gutenberg. Gutenberg has come a long way, but it still takes me twice, 3 times, sometimes 4 times as long to write content in Gutenberg than it did Classic Editor. That is quite a shame to me. It's not at all what I think the project intended to do, but it is something that happened, and it's something that isn't changing very quickly. And then the more the page builder side of Gutenberg, full site editing, that's like the area 51 in accessibility. You just don't go there. It does not work. It's awful. So I'm hoping as a project, we can change that at least some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Alex. Meg.
I have experience. No, I don't know the back end very well for accessibility, because through some of the auditing, I don't use page builders, and I audit generally the front end, excluding Gutenberg. But I have found deep-rooted issues in all of them, in addition to security issues, and in addition to subpar site performance when you start adding all of those page builder layers on top of it. So, and it really makes it much easier to start messing content accessibility up when you start introducing these weird divvy layouts and stuff like that. So I'm just extremely anti page builder, short of Gutenberg core. It's just too much.
Yeah, Amber.
I don't know. I think there's a combination. I will say the thing about Elementor is they have been adding more fields where you can add ARIA labels and adding support for things like that, which is very helpful. So maybe that's a step towards them guiding people more into it. But really, I think with page builders, you have to be careful. And the thing I always say is page builders is for building the content of your page, not your entire site. Don't build your header or your footer with a page builder. Your theme should be doing that. maybe don't even build your sidebars, depending upon what that is, right? Because that's where I see a lot of problems. And then also being cautious about which of the widgets or modules or blocks or whatever they call it you're using, which can happen in core too if you install a random plugin with a slider block that's not accessible, right? So choose your blocks carefully. Don't use a form from a page builder. Never, ever use a form from a form plugin, because the form plugins will most definitely have spent more time thinking about it. So those kinds of things.
Good answers. Yeah, I think no page builder is the best page builder, I think is the message we're hearing here. So that's really great. Let's jump in. I know we're probably going to go over our 1 hour. So I understand if you do have to jump off, but let's go ahead and check out the Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker. Amber's actually going to be showing us some new things today that are coming out soon. So this is kind of an exclusive reveal here that we've got. So we're really excited to see it. So Amber, take it away.
Yeah, I was debating this. I usually use a fake website, but what I've shared today is actually a real website from an old nonprofit that I used to run, and the nonprofit doesn't exist anymore. And I was like, I want to do this on real content. So I spun this up from a random backup I had from 2015. So I was like, it's definitely going to have accessibility problems. So this is just kind of what it looks like. There's purple and green, and the green is kind of I don't even know how to describe this, kind of a grayish green. So it is most definitely failing color contrast. I know that immediately just looking at it. So I spun this up last night, and this morning I just installed Accessibility Checker. And the first thing I do have the pro version on, just so everyone is aware, is I can go under the Accessibility Checker menu in WordPress admin. There's a full site scan option, and we can install, when you install it and you go there, it'll do it. Right now, you can see it's sort of in progress. So it has a banner that tells me 78%. It's checked 59 of the 75 pages. And then it has a log for me below it that shows every post by the ID and then every single check that it did. And then if it completed or if it failed, it would show me in case we run into an error. You can actually set up your scans to run on a weekly or a monthly basis if you want them to go on a regular basis, or you can come at any time and just hit start a new full site scan. And you have the ability in the free version, you can only scan posts and pages. In the pro version, you can choose which of your post types you want to check. So I've gone to the settings page now, and you can see a list of the different post types. And I have posts and pages, but I've also checked off product, which comes from WooCommerce, tribe events, which comes from the events calendar, and directory, which is a custom post type. But I haven't checked off topic and reply and forum, which come out of bbPress. Because this website has bbPress, because I'm sort of thinking, well, I don't know if I'm going to check the accessibility of every person's comment in the forum, right? So I don't really want to scan those post types for problems. So what it does, and it's not fully done, but you can see things as it progresses. If we go to the pages, then we get additional columns added to our pages list that show us the number or the % of past accessibility tests. And this is important. We say past accessibility tests because not automated checkers are super helpful in speeding up identification of obvious problems, but it does not mean it's 100% accessible, because there are things that automated checkers, including ours, cannot find. So I do want to explain that, this is a great tool for speeding up your process, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't screen reader test it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go on the front end and use the tab key to move around your website. And then we have a column for the number of accessibility errors, color contrast errors, accessibility warnings, and then if you have ignored items. This will give you a high level overview. And then on any individual page, we could I haven't even looked at this because it's been running, right? So I'm trying to think, what would we want to look at? Maybe we'll just look at the history page. So on any individual page, it will put in below. So I've converted this from old. So this is a Gutenberg editor, but you can see it is in a classic block because I imported this from a really ancient site yesterday. But below it, and hopefully will load, I'm pretty sure this was a page that had been scanned. We're gonna see. All right, so below the editor, it puts in a summary tab that shows us the percent passed, those same items that we saw before, errors, contrast errors, warnings, and ignored items. We also do a readability scan, and we'll tell you the grade level using a Flesch Kincaid, which is really important, especially if you're going for AAA compliance, which a lot of government agencies are doing. You need to be 9th grade or below in order to meet the average reading level. And then you can go over to the details tab and see a list of errors and warnings that have caused problems. So for example, on this website, I'm seeing 9 insufficient color contrast. There's 2 missing form labels, 1 incorrect heading order, 10 links that open a new window or tab, 1 missing subheadings, and 1 text justified. This I element right now is the best way to get information about them. It goes to documentation on our website, but we are actually in the process. Let me open a different one. We are in the process of working to add more instructions when you expand any one of these so that it's right here in the editor and you don't even have to leave. So I've expanded missing form label, and we can see there's a input of a search form input. And I actually think this is the core WordPress one. And it is missing a label. It just has placeholder text, search this website. So this is something that would show up on every single page, and I would need to make a code fix for this. So you can look at things individually, but an item like this, or if there was something that was a false positive, you could click the ignore. Oh, look, I don't have permission right now to ignore this issue. So this is, we have in Pro, we have the ability for users of certain user roles to ignore and other ones can't, which is a good governance thing. If you're like, maybe only I want to ignore and I don't want my clients to be able to, or the dev can, but the content creator can't. And so what's useful there is that we have built in, I'll just show you real quick what it looks like now and then where it's going. We have an open issues tab, and there's a couple of different views here. And the first one is just literally every issue across the site. So currently, and it's still scanning, it's telling me that there's 2005 issues. And I can see where they are, but where we start when we're auditing, and what's really helpful is clicking over to this fast track tab on the open issues page. And under the fast track tab, it groups issues by unique code snippet. So where before individual open issues, there were over 2,000 on my fast track, I'm actually only seeing 293 issues. And I can see a code snippet in the first column of the table. The second column says affected pages. And then the second column tells me the number of failing checks that it has, and it sort of orders by that. So for example, we have a link, so it's an A tag, and if I click on it, it's telling me insufficient color contrast. It's on 73 different pages. So I could, if this was a false positive or something, I could hit a global ignore and it would clear that out of all of those pages so that it doesn't show up. But in this instance, I know it needs to be fixed because we were talking about that gray-green color. So this is a great way to start because I can fix my link colors in one place, probably in my theme code. And then I run a new scan and it would clear it out for all of those pages. So it can help you with prioritizing fixes. What we're going to, and I know I'm going fast, so I'm happy to answer questions later, but I'm trying to be respectful of people's time. So what we're moving to on the open issues, this is the preview that no one has seen. It's special just for the awesome GoWP community, is we're working on taking that open issues, whereas before it was a big list of 2,000 things, and you can filter by page or by post type if you want, and you can order them, but we're really going and providing a higher level overview. So I've jumped to a different website that has this on it now. And the table, when you first go to open issues, instead of listing them all out, it has 3 columns. The first one is the check that lists the kind of problem. The second one is the type, which tells you if it's an error or a warning. And then the third column is a count. So you can see how many of that is. And then if there aren't anything, it would say passed in the type and it would say 0 in the count. And so this would allow us to, let's see, if I'll just go to empty link, for example. So if I click on empty link, it then takes me to an empty link page where I can see all of the empty links. In this instance, there are 52 empty links on this particular website. And it has, like I was talking about, we're trying to bring more instruction into WordPress. It has a box that explains about empty link errors, what they are, how you might fix them right here. And then you can see them and you can do the same sort of thing where you could still filter by a post type to only see empty links on pages or on portfolio items on this particular website, or you could order them by their post title if you wanted to do any of that. So this is where we're going with it, which is super exciting. I don't have a release date for this yet because we're working out some kinks and running some tests on some really big websites, because we're also doing a lot of performance optimization with this next release. But our goal is to create a tool that makes it easier both for developers to find problems as they're building websites, but with putting the report right on the edit screen to make it easier for content creators to find problems as they're creating content. Hopefully they fix them before they go live, rather than some of the other tools that are out there. Scan it every week after it's published and send you a report, and then you have to go back and fix it, which adds to remediation time and cost, and it's better to just catch them up front. So.
This is great, Amber. And I don't know if you saw the chat at all, but people are really excited about what they're seeing. Lots of comments about the fast track was so cool, and this new way that you're visualizing the issues also have a lot of people excited. And something that I love that Kyle pointed out in the chat, and that I noticed you doing as well, is how even when you're explaining the plugin and what it does, you're explaining it with accessibility in mind. You're visually talking about how it looks visually so that people can see it without seeing it, right? So that's something too that was really cool to witness and see that as well. So really, really great. I'm so excited we got to see this first. Thanks for sharing it with our community. Yeah. And did you mention, is there a date when this will be available, or do you have a planned kind of launch for this?
For our new open issues, I don't know if we have a release update. So all the other stuff I showed you, it's all there, and the free plugin and the pro plugin are both available. This specific upgrade for the pro plugin, I'm not sure what our release date is specifically. We have a few items that we're working out, and I mentioned we're actually testing it on a website right now that had 84,000 issues. So it's like a really great one to like really test on and make sure that we're being able to handle, because it really came down to, like, for us also the performance and trying to improve that, especially if, someone's on Bluehost and they have a lot of problems. So, an inexpensive host makes it more challenging when you're running scans right on the server. So.
Absolutely. Very cool. And we'll post a link to this also in the chat. There was one, I know we're over, there was one more question that came in about accessibility and pop-up forms. Can we answer that really fast? Do you have, Alex, Meg, Amber, anything to say about pop-up, not forms, I'm sorry, just pop-ups. So pop-ups on screens, are they problematic? What's the consensus on pop-ups?
99% of them are inaccessible. I mean,
99%.
Oh yes, at least. Oh, I really love the ones that pop up and say, please subscribe to our newsletter. Those are my favorite, because after I close it, you lose your place in the big blog article you were reading because none of them manage focus right. And it's really, I mean, really, really rare to find ones that work perfectly. But I can't even think of any.
Have you tried Pop-Up Maker? I feel like Pop-Up Maker does an okay job, and I think they return focus well too, at least on click triggered pop-ups. They'll return focus back to where you triggered the click or the open. I'm not 100% certain about returning focus if it's an auto pop-up, but
Yeah, so a lot of the click pop-ups, those have a little bit of a better success rating for accessibility, but I was talking about the really annoying like marketing promotion auto pop-ups that come out of
Yeah.
nowhere, totally unprovoked. But yeah,
Yeah.
most of the ones that you click, they're not terrible. I mean, there's some that have some issues, but most work all right.
I think as far as like the auto pop-ups, I do think Pop-Up Maker is the best that I've seen at like they shift focus into the pop-up. They alert you that a pop-up has opened, like auditorily, so you can hear it, and they force focus to stay in it. So that's one thing I've seen with other ones, which is it doesn't keep your focus locked in it, and you can hit tab too many times, and now you're back in the page, but the pop-up is still open, and you don't know how to get back to it to close it, or yeah, it's just weird. I feel like Pop-Up Maker does an okay job.
And I use, if I want to create something more custom, I use modal with 2 A's. And that's a custom implementation. And you can go mess around with the code and stuff like that. And they do a really good job also.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's not surprising to hear that, but it's good feedback. And it was, for me, it was enlightening to hear kind of how it works on with the screen readers and everything. So I shared links to Modal there and WP Pop-Up Maker, and also to Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker, where you can check out Amber and Equalize Digital's accessibility checker and try that out on your sites. It's awesome. As you guys can see in the chat, lots of fans for that. So definitely recommend checking that out. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Alex, for your time. Thank you for being so forthcoming with your wisdom, your experience, your insights, all of that. Thank you for taking your time today to answer questions from our community and help come up with questions to get this conversation started as well. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. And for those of you who submitted questions and were engaged in the chat and all of that, these conversations are important, and having it on Global Accessibility Day, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, is just really a great thing. So thank you everybody for joining us. Have questions that come up afterward. Amber, I know, is in our Facebook group. Tag her in a question there. You can ask those questions. We have Bet, we have Bet Hannon, who also specializes in accessibility. She's in that group. So lots of great people who have accessibility knowledge and wisdom are in there. So if you still have questions after this, or if you're watching this recording and you have questions following it, go to the Facebook group and we'll be happy to help you out. So thank you, everybody. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you, guys. Have a great night or great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.